Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Nick and I am an alcoholic. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 right here. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Welcome. Welcome. And welcome to everybody. Happy New Year, by the way. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the floor for the good of AA? We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member before or after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in a jar on the table marked Big Book and CD Donations. If you'd like a CD of any speaker past or present, please see myself or any home group member before or after the meeting, and they are available free of charge. And now with that, we have Kara to come up and read the AA Preamble.
Hello everybody, my name's Kara, I'm an alcoholic. Hello everybody. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Now I've asked Teresa to come up and read our 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Teresa.
The AA 12 Steps of Recovery. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in our affairs. Now Nick's going to come back up.
We have a 7th tradition which states every AA group ought to be fully self-supported and declining outside contributions. At this time, we'd like to pass the baskets. We have no dues or fees, but we do have expenses, and this group provides many services. Your donations cover rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops. Once again, there is absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and try to limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And now let's introduce our speaker, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, a veteran of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, our old good friend Brian T. from Colorado.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everybody to being of service of this group. It's awesome to be back here at this group. It's an honor and a pleasure anytime I get to speak for AA, right? It's an honor and a pleasure when I get the chance to come up here and share my message in hopes that it'll help somebody else on their journey, you know. I think that's really representative of what AA is, right, and what my participation in this group has been over the years, right, as I come and I show up and I participate, I make myself of service, and in return I get to experience, you know, sobriety, and I get all those gifts of sobriety, and that's really been my experience with this group. You know, it's awesome to be up here speaking for this group specifically because obviously, as many of the people here know, was very active with this group for a number of years in the recent past, and it afforded me. Just gotta bring it a little closer. Okay. It afforded me the opportunity to, you know, come here on a weekly basis, and like I said, I just showed up and I, to the best of my ability, made myself of service to AA, to this program, and to other people. And, you know, as a reward, I got to come here on a weekly basis and see some of the best speakers in my opinion, all of AA from, you know, all areas of the country, of the world, really. And that was a huge part of my sobriety for a number of years, as I'll get into as I get into my story a little bit. I guess, yeah, with that, tonight I'll hope to, as our book says, disclose in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I'll start by giving you guys a little bit of background on myself personally. I was born right around here, right at Doylestown Hospital, right? I went to CB West, you know, so I'm from this area. Not a lot of people that speak at this meeting can say that, so at least I got that going for me, right? Yeah, and I had a great childhood, right? I grew up around here. I had a great childhood. I never needed for anything. I had 2 loving parents. I had a great family, one of 4 children. I never, early on in my life, had any sort of, really any kind of adversity, any kind of trauma, any, you know, I have nothing that I point to early in my life that I said looking back on it, like that was a contributing factor in why I became an alcoholic, right? There's many people that maybe have that, and there's a lot of, you know, genetic and environmental factors that go into that, which I have seen, you know, and many of us are aware of. But that just wasn't the case for me personally, right? I never had anything like that early on. And what I came to find when I got into this program, right, and trying to explain that is there was the reason that I am an alcoholic is simply because I love the effect that alcohol produces in me, right? It does something for me that it doesn't do for the average person. It provides this easier, softer way to get to this sense of ease and comfort that prior to finding that in my life, I never had anything like that, you know? So when that came about, I gravitated towards that very, very quickly. And growing up, when I look back on like my younger adolescent years, I definitely see now that the ism of alcoholism manifested itself in my life from a young age, right? Like I picked up on some things that when I look back on, I was like, yeah, that was alcoholism. And one of the biggest things that I think when I look back on it is from a young age, really learning to just like manipulate people and circumstances in my life to my advantage and trying to arrange things, you know, to my liking. That happened, I guess you would say, really from like my adolescent, like teenage years, right? It became, my priority was to, you know, gravitate towards the things that made me feel good, you know? I didn't really heed the warnings of like my parents or like teachers and kind of rolled to the beat of my own drum. I wasn't too worried about like what I was supposed to be doing as much as it was like, I'm gonna do what I want to do, you know. And at that time, as like a teenage boy, it was like skateboarding and rock music and those things. But that was where I found comfort, and that was what I did. That was the priority for me in life. You know what I mean? And I figured out, like I said, that as long as I manipulate my circumstances, as long as I have those teachers, you know, my parents, as long as I keep the grades up and I kind of keep the outside looking pretty good, nobody's going to bother me, and that leaves me to my own devices. I can do what I want to do, you know. And that type of behavior pretty much followed suit through into my adult life, or like later on as I got like a job, and you know, it became like supervisors, people at work, judges, police officers. It was always this quest to kind of put up this image of like everything's okay, and I got them on the right track. I got it figured out. We're gonna do good this time. And that's how it went early on. I didn't really drink and use, like I said, there wasn't really an influence of like drugs and alcohol in my life. I had an older sister, but that wasn't, she wasn't involved with that, and neither of my parents drank. I wasn't exposed to any kind of drinking early in my life, and therefore it never really had much appeal to me, honestly. Even through most of my teenage years, it just really wasn't my kind of scene. And I don't know what it was. Like I tried, I remember drinking when I was in my teenage years at like a Thanksgiving event with the family, and I remember going around and grabbing all the wine glasses that nobody drank after the toast and getting drunk and like having that experience with it and being like, okay. And I remember like smoking pot one time when I was like 15 years old, but those early encounters with it, even then there wasn't like this white light experience where I gravitated towards it. Time just kind of continued on, and it really wasn't until I got to like my senior year of high school, and I don't know what it was, I just kind of had some friends and the circumstances aligned, and I started trying some different things, and in a short time I started to gravitate towards it. I started partying more and more. I started gaining like new friends. I started dating a girl. I had a girlfriend, a serious girlfriend for the first time in my life. And like I said, I was going to parties. I was having a good time. I had friends that were like-minded, that were doing the things I like to do, and I felt very part of, And that was a really big component of it. It felt like a very like coming of age time, and alcohol kind of just came on very naturally to me. You know what I mean? And I just ran with it, man, and really from the time it was like senior year in high school, I continued on, and I graduated okay, although my grades started to dip towards senior year and towards the end of senior year. But I graduated, and really by the time I got through that, and it got to, that summer over my senior year, I was just fully immersed, you know what I mean? And like I said, I was just partying, drinking every day, and that was my priority, was doing that and hanging out with my friends and doing the things that I wanted to do. That was, and I was just content with that, man. That was really all that mattered to me at that time. And if I could have it any other way, it's like that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life, And as time went on, certain things started to fall by the wayside. Like I had graduated and went to college. I went to Drexel University because I had done this co-op program through the tech school over in Jamison there, and I had this opportunity to go to Drexel, and I did a semester there, and I just gave it up pretty much like after a semester because I didn't want to, like I said, my priority was back here. It was like with the girlfriend I had, that I thought that was the important thing, was like me partying with my friends, with my boys, and being with my girlfriend. That was the priority. So that fell by the wayside, and I just decided I would get a full-time job. And years just went by, and it was pretty unremarkable for a long time there. That's really all it was. It was just like was like working and partying like as much as I could all the time. And like I said, I would have been perfectly fine if that had just gone on, but the problem was that like circumstances around me and my life changed, you know what I mean? And us alcoholics, we don't really adapt too well to change sometimes, and that's what happened. It's like the world around me was changing, and eventually that girlfriend, she left me and decided she was going to go on and do other things with her life, and I didn't really realize it at the time. I just became really resentful, but there was definitely a shift in my drinking around that time. I guess I was about 21 then, so I'd really been like drinking and drugging on a pretty much daily basis for like 3 years then, and like I said, I didn't really notice it at the time, but there was a change, right? Because at that point, it was like, no longer was drinking just like this social outlet, this thing that I like to do. It became like, at that point I started drinking, and I was drinking because I like had to drink, I had to like get rid of these feelings that I had, that I was, wasn't good enough, and that I had failed, and I was like lonely. It was all these negative feelings, and I just didn't want to deal with any of that. I just wanted to do what brought me that sense of comfort and roll forward with that. And, that just kind of thing started to spiral from there. And, what was already an issue just, again, years go by. Pretty unremarkable for a couple years there. It was just always kind of like one step forward, 2 steps back. It was like I started to experience started to see some consequences as a result of my drinking, right? I was getting like in trouble at work. I would always get like the slap on the wrist at work. I got like my first DUI, and that was kind of, something I had to see through. And, finally I was like starting to see like consequences, but it was never anything that was like significant enough that I thought that I was gonna, that I was like an alcoholic and alcohol was the problem. It was always kind of this mentality that I was just gonna go forward, and eventually I would grow my way out of it, and I'd find on, I had, you know, it was pointing elsewhere, looking at problems in my life, like it was circumstances in my life that I just needed to change the place and the time and the job and like whatever it was. I just needed to manipulate the right circumstances and change things and get things moving again. Never pointed at like alcohol as the problem. I never thought like for a second that I would need to like stop drinking. That was never even a solution in my mind. It's funny because when I ended up in AA, that was really like something that was, you know, I thought about it, and like I remember from a younger age, my parents had forced me into doing like outpatient stuff, you know, and I learned about the existence of like a 12-step program from the age of like 19 years old, right? But when I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous was at the age of 27, which I'll get to. Like I never in that period in between like the age of 19 to 27 associated myself at all as an alcoholic or thought that maybe that 12-step program was what I needed, right? And that was because I never wanted to point the problem at like the alcohol and the alcoholism, right? I just never thought that was the case. I never associated myself as that. And why was that? Probably because if I associated myself as an alcoholic, it meant I had to do something about it, right? Which meant removing the alcohol from the equation, which was just like unimaginable to me. You know, it was always like there had to be some other way, some way that I could kind of taper it back and like figure out how to drink successfully, you know, and that kind of mindset really carried me forward, you know, through early sobriety. That was kind of the way I felt. I really wasn't full sold on the program, but to get into what brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, the circumstances of it, I guess, when I was about 25 years old, I think, I'd finally like moved out of my parents' house. And I moved in with a really good buddy of mine. We moved into this like nice house, you know, we were renting it out. And that was really like the beginning of the end, I guess, because any inhibition I had to like kind of cover my tracks or do what I was doing went out the window. You know, I just like, my world started to get really small. I started isolating myself from my family and from other friends I had, you know, and it just became over the course of the next 2 years, things just deteriorated, and I just got to a point where, you know, I just remember like towards the end, I just always remember that like it just, when I woke up in the morning, it was like, it always felt like from the time my feet hit the ground until I laid my head on the pillow at night, it was like every single bit of my being went into this thing that was like my addiction, right? It was like every bit of energy and time and money, like everything just funneled into like this maelstrom of this addiction that I had, you know, and it was really just like a dark place to be. I became really like indifferent about life towards the end, you know. I never really got like suicidal per se, but I just like accepted that this was the way life was, that this was the hand that I was dealt, because I just, I got to that jumping off point, I guess, and it's just like I could not imagine life continuing to go on for much longer the way it was, the current state I was in. And at the same time, I couldn't ever imagine like going back to the way things were before, like a life without drinking, you know, like I didn't know what a life like that would look like. I couldn't imagine it. And that's where I was. I was just kind of there for a while, and then it wasn't by my own choice, but due to the intervention, of course, of like law enforcement, I became physically separated from alcohol. On, what was it, May 7th of 2014. And, you know, I ended up getting arrested, was arrested for my second DUI at the time and like a litany of drug-related charges. And I was in trouble, and like any good alcoholic, I, you know, went to a lawyer and, you know, consulted my family and just tried to figure out what the best course of action was to kind of run with my tail between my legs and do damage control and figure out what I needed to do to kind of, you know, please the powers that be, you know, and just kind of figure out what I was going to do. I wanted to, you know, save my own head was like all I was worried about. You know, what was I going to have to do to kind of get things back to the way they were before, you know, that was my priority. And I went to a lawyer, and he advised me to go somewhere and get an evaluation and I ended up going into an inpatient rehab for the first time in my life when I was 27 years old. And in between that time, between when I got arrested, right, like I lost my job, and you know, it was just in this short span of a couple of days, it was like everything in my life just got turned on its head, like immediately, you know what I mean? And I had no idea what was happening, because even up until like as bad as things were, looking back on it, you know, as any good alcoholic, like I was able to rationalize and convince myself that I was doing pretty good, right? It was like I had my own place. I was usually able to make ends meet as far as the bills, you know. I thought I was doing pretty okay, and like I said, just in a matter of a couple of days, it was like my whole world was flipped on its head, and it was like, how did I end up here, right? I'm sitting there, I'm in this inpatient rehab for the first time, 27 years old, with nothing to show for anything in my life, right? Like no money in the bank, like nothing, you know? And I didn't know what to do. Like I said, it was dark and it was a scary time, and I really didn't know what was gonna happen. I didn't know what was in front of me. And from getting into rehab right from the get-go, right, like there was definitely some good intentions. At this point, like, you know, I always like to, a member of my original home group, which was up in Scranton, used to always say that when he was in early sobriety, you know, there was a war going on in his head, and I always related to that so much because, like, it was literally like from minute to minute, my head was just pulling me in a million different places because it was like I went into the rehab, and to some extent I had like good intentions because I was willing to recognize that things were not going the way that I had hoped that I wanted to in my life, right? Because of the circumstances, it's like, look where I am and look what's happened to me. Maybe I need to start to address some of these issues in my life. But at the same time, you know, them preaching like long-term sobriety was just so far from anything I could imagine that it had to be, you know, there had to be some median in between, right? I was still fully subscribed to the fact that I was going to be able to impose my will on this situation. I would be able to go into this rehab and maybe pick up these bits and pieces of like things that they're going to teach me, and I would be able to take that back to my own life, and I would be able to apply some of these things that they showed me and basically learn how to drink successfully. That was pretty much the mentality from the start, was like what I was looking at. But I was just like the star student at rehab, of course, right? You know, I hang around for a couple of days and I learn the language. I learned pretty quickly what the counselors want to hear from me, the things that I need to say to make people think that I really kind of don't belong here, and I've just kind of got caught up in this, and it's just like, you know, I'm going to just be fine. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to finish this 30 days at this rehab, but I'm going to go back home and I'll do some kind of outpatient thing, and I'll probably go on probation because of the pending legal circumstances, and you know, a couple months from now, you know, hopefully that'll be done with, and I'll be right back to square one, right back to where I was, you know. And that was pretty much like the mentality for most rehab. But like I was there, and my first sponsor, he always, you know, when I ended up meeting him, he said, you know, you need to be open-minded, you need to be honest, and you need to be willing. And I feel like even prior to getting with him and prior to hearing that, I feel like I had that from the get-go when I got to the rehab, right? Like I was like, I'm here, I'm gonna listen to everything that people are saying, and I'm gonna be open-minded about this, and I'm going to try to give it my all for the most part. You know, I'm gonna give everything I was capable of giving, which wasn't like a ton at the time, but I would listen, you know what I mean? And I would kind of try to associate myself and try to listen to some of the things that they were saying, and at some points it kind of made me feel like I relate to that, you know, maybe there's something to this. And then at other times it was total deflection, you know, it was just like listening to, well, I've never done that, I've never been in that situation, I'm probably not an alcoholic, I don't belong here. And that's, again, like I said, just the up and down and kind of like the denial and not really ever giving that full surrender was like, it wasn't, that just wasn't my experience from the get-go, right? Like when I came in here, I didn't come in here, like I guess I just hadn't lost enough at the time. But like when I first came into AA, I kind of, I don't know, disassociated myself. I didn't think that I really belonged here, you know. And I made it through the first 30 days, I made it through the 30 days of rehab, right? And I started to get to the end of my stay, and they were bringing in my parents for like the family consultation. And up until that point, like I said, I was full well convinced that I was going to leave after my 30 days of rehab, and I would go back to my job that I had lost, you know, because I would tell them I'm good. I went to treatment, and they would take me back, and I was ready to just go back to the exact same circumstances of my life before. And when my parents came in, they pitched on me that they didn't want me to go back here, which here was the time I was living around Doylestown. They wanted me to continue with kind of the program I was doing and go from the rehab to a halfway house that was up in the Scranton area for another 90 days after this. And I thought that was absurd, right? Because I thought, I can't do that. Like I had bills to pay. I had like a girl I was seeing at the time. But like all these small things that like when I look back now were so inconsequential to the grand picture, which was like my life itself. Like I was dying there, you know, in the rehab. But I just couldn't get past that, you know. I thought that was what I needed to do, was I thought it was absurd. And they pitched me that like a day or two before my parents showed up, and let me kind of sit on it. And I was full well convinced that I was going to go into that meeting at the rehab with my parents, and I was going to have to tell them, let them down, and say that I wasn't going to do this, that I was going to have to come back home, and I was going to figure it out for myself. But when they got there, I don't know what it was. It was just like, I guess it was the 30 days of being separated from alcohol and actually looking at them and how proud they were of like what I was doing, that I was doing better, and that I'd been in this place and I'd done the program. I just like couldn't find it in myself to just spit in their face and say, I do not need the help that you're willing to offer me, that you're going to support me like through this. And, I just couldn't do that to them. And I did agree that I would go and I would do these 90 days at this other facility up in the Scranton area. And so I went directly from the rehab. They drove me to this place, and that's really where my path to sobriety, I feel like, started. You know what I mean? Because like I said, when I was in the rehab, I started like associating myself. I started getting kind of like with this God concept. I started exploring that a little bit because I've been raised with like a religious background. I kind of had this concept of God, and I was sort of trying to get with those first 3 steps and sort of get some footing on it. But like I said, still wasn't really full well sold on the program of AA in its entirety for sure. But I got to this place, I got to this halfway house. I started associating with some of the guys there, started talking to people, started talking to a couple of guys that were like my age, and kind of had similar stories to like what I had been through. And they were like sober for like a year and 2 years and hadn't gone back, and they seemed like they were doing really well in life, you know what I mean? It was just such the situation of, when I look back on it now, like that attraction rather than promotion, right? Like I was meeting these people, and they were just living this life, and when I talked to them and they told me their story, it sounded a lot like what happened to me, but like, and they insisted that this had kind of worked for them, and that kind of sold me a little bit, you know what I mean? I was like, you know what, maybe there is something to this, and that really came to a head after I had been up there for, it was probably like 3 weeks or something like that, and you were pretty much, I was in this halfway house, and you had to participate in meetings, you had to go, you had to get a sponsor, and I was talking to people, I was participating in the groups, I didn't get a sponsor, I did not do that for the first 3 weeks or so, which you're pretty much supposed to do immediately when you get there, so I was kind of on the hot seat with that, but I didn't want to get a sponsor, right? Because my conception of what a sponsor at the time was that it's somebody that's just going to watch over me, that's going to report back to the PO, that's going to report to my parents, and I was looking at it, and it was just like, I already got like enough of these figures of authority looming over me, right? I got everybody watching over my back. I don't need another person that's just going to tell me what to do, you know what I mean, and this and that, and my conception of what a sponsor was pretty skewed, right? Because it's not, what I came to find is that it was not a sponsor's job to get me sober, to beat into me, or to, impose upon me what I need to do to get sober, right? The sponsor's job is simply to share his experience with me, right? The sponsor just simply shares his experience with me and tells me his experience with this program and how he came to have a relationship with this higher power of his understanding and how that enabled him to start working these steps in his life, right? That's like what the sponsor was. It was not what I thought it was. So yeah, after I was there for about 3 weeks, I finally did get with this guy, and I asked him to be my sponsor, and kind of begrudgingly, of course, because I didn't really think, as far as the sponsor went, I didn't really think I was finding someone that could understand me, right? That could understand my circumstances and I was going to be able to relate to. And this guy, he was like a little bit older than me, and he didn't really have like the same experiences. He was more like just alcohol. He didn't so much have the drugs in his story, and he was like a family man. He had been married and had some kids. So there were a lot of differences, and I really didn't think that like if I got with this guy and I started doing some of this step work that we were going to click, and I was quickly proven wrong, like literally from the first time we sat down and got into the book, right? Because like he's reading through the book and he's sharing like his experiences and the way he felt, and it really started to break down those walls of like, oh yeah, like I relate to that, I have felt all of those exact same things, and I know exactly what he's talking about with that. So we got into the step work pretty quickly. While I was at this place for 90 days, we started getting into it. Step 1 was like pretty easy for me, right? Because like I said, I had ended up in like a rehab at 27 years old, had nothing to show for it. It was obvious to me that I did not have power over alcohol. There was a lot of unmanageability in my life. There wasn't much to that one. And step two, like I said, when I was in the rehab, I started to kind of get with this conception of God, which I had long been separated from, for many years at that point, and overthink it a whole lot, trying to figure out like exactly what this God of my understanding meant and the kind of power that it had. Really spent like a long time with that, trying to figure out exactly what that meant to me, like the God of my understanding. And the thing when I look back on it now is a lot of my understanding of what a higher power is, right? It's that I have to place my faith in a higher power of my understanding that I fully don't understand, and that I'm just willing to sort of invest my faith blindly and trust that the answers that I need and the power is going to come to me like when I need it, right? Like it's not always going to be on my time, because when I'm trying to like figure out exactly what a higher power means to me and like what it's capable of, then I'm trying to be my own God, right? So I found that I just have to, this whole program really, and finding a higher power of my understanding is really just taking that leap of faith that I'm going to trust that I don't have all the answers, right? And that was just what I found in retrospect, but like I said, it took me kind of a long time to sort of get exactly nailed down what I was thinking there. And yeah, as far as the third step, like I said, I was struggling for a long time, like in the rehab, and while I was in this facility, just kind of trying to fully commit to this program, and that I was going to do everything that was asked of me. And I had this experience. I was there for about a month, and we were in like a meeting, and it was on a Monday night, and they were reading from the book, and like I was saying, all these guys that I had met throughout my experience there at this facility so far were sharing on this book and their experience and how they related to what we just read in the book and how they had that same experience. And I didn't know what they were talking about, like at all. Could not relate to anything they were saying. But I knew that these guys, were telling the truth, right? Like I believed what they were saying. And I remember that they read this part in the big book. I think it's in How It Works. And it says this is where we go from having, This is where we go from having a spiritual experience to having a spiritual awakening. And, they started sharing on that and how they had this thing called a spiritual awakening. And I had no clue what that meant, like at all, But apparently they did. And I had this moment of surrender there. I really believe that it was kind of like a third step experience where I just had this moment of surrender. And I was like, I have no idea what any of these guys are talking about and what that is, but it sounds pretty good. And they seem pretty well convinced that if I follow like what they're saying and I try to do what they're doing, that maybe I can have that experience and maybe something like that can happen for me. And I really wanted that, Like I really had, like I said, good intentions where the life that this program was kind of promising, it seemed appealing to me. I just didn't really think I had it in me, right? I was just like hopeless. I just didn't think I was going to be able to do it. But yeah, after that, that was just like kind of a point where I just sort of like sold myself. I was all in on it. I was like, I'm just going to do everything that's asked of me, and I'm going to like suspend my own disbelief, and I'm just going to try to do all of these things that are being suggested of me and see where it takes me, And so I continued to follow up after I spent like 90 days. I actually ended up staying at that facility for a little over 90 days. And I was coming towards the end of my stay, and I'd gone back, like they got me in front of the judge a couple of times as I was dealing with like these legal issues, and they were kind of on like a wait and see basis. They just kind of would get me back in front of the judge every month or so, and like they would give like a progress update. My sponsor would come down with me, drive from Scranton down here, and we would appear in front of the judge, and my lawyer would be there. And it would just kind of, they were just like letting me wait and see. And finally, it was in like November that year, so it was like in total about 6 months later after the time that I'd been arrested. And everything got dropped. They ended up like the judge, had just worked with me and had watched me, and I guess believed that I was sincere in this, and they ended up dropping like all the charges, and I got off on that really lucky. It was, I just like got my whole experience like in sobriety, and that was like another example of it. Like I just had such a gift of like my path to sobriety was just like such a great gift that I appreciate now, but I didn't at the time, you know, like having all the little things that like I took for granted, like having like the support of like my family and people that cared about me, that were willing to, you know, that was all stuff I took for granted, you know. When I look back on it now, I had just like I just was given this great path to sobriety, you know, and put in the position where I was able to do that kind of thing. And it's just something that I'm just so grateful for and try to carry with me, you know, to this day. But I eventually ended up leaving that facility, and I ended up staying up there in the Scranton area, which again was not my plan from the get-go. You know, when I got there, I was convinced that I was going to do 90 days at this place, and I was going to, again, get back here, and I was going to start to get the ball rolling, pick back up where I left off. And by the time I got through the 90 days there, I had decided that I was going to stay up there, that I built this foundation. I had all of these friends in the community up there of AA. I had a home group up there. And I just got out, and I wasn't exactly sure what to do. And my sponsor, he ran like a sober house, and he got me a room in that house, and I stayed there. And then another member of my home group, he got me a job because I didn't know where I was going to go to work. He got me a job. He usually hired like a couple of guys that were in early sobriety. So I got this job with a guy from my home group and a couple other guys that were involved like with this halfway house and with my home group. And ended up working this job, which didn't like pay great, but it was perfect for me at the time, you know what I mean? Because I was working around other guys that were in the program, and it was absolutely what I needed. And it was just in that time, it was just, AA just like took care of me, you know? It did for me what I couldn't do for myself at that time, you know? They just set me up for success by doing those things, by finding me a place to live and a place to work. And I wasn't gonna take advantage of that, you know what I mean? I tried that, you know, it was like, as we all know, it's like, what do I do to repay them? I go to the next guy, right? And I do the exact same thing. And that's really just what I did. I didn't take it for granted, and I just, I moved forward, you know? Started working and just like was active in my home group, was active in a bunch of meetings up there, and was still active with the guys that were back at the halfway house. And I just hit the ground running with it. My first year up there was pretty good. When I was about 10 months sober, I got a call and I found out that my younger brother had passed away pretty much as like a direct result of untreated alcoholism. And that was like obviously the most difficult thing that I've had to deal with in life and sobriety or anything. And that threw me for a curve, you know. And obviously there's a lot of things I could say about that. I could talk about how that affected like my sobriety, my relationship with my family, with a God of my understanding and all those things. And usually when I come up here and speak, I like to speak specifically about how that affected my sobriety. If anybody out there is struggling with like something like that, get with me after the meeting. I'd love to like, you know, exchange numbers with you and share what my experience with that was, you know, and how I worked my way through it. But, you know, after that happened, like, I think as far as my sobriety, up until that point, I still felt like I was being like pretty selfish in my sobriety because, like I said, all these people, my family, people I knew from my home group, they just like given so much of themselves and helped me out so much. And I was like, I was feeling good. I was like, you know, I gotten this far and I felt good about what I was doing, but I still felt like deep inside that I still kind of had a bit of a desire to drink. And I felt bad about that, right? Because it was like the obsession to drink left me pretty quickly, right? I didn't feel like I had this obsession, like I was going to go drink. I knew that like I had all these circumstances in my life and it was not going to help me at all. But it was like deep down inside, I feel like if I was like the last man on earth, right, I feel like I would go back to drinking. It was like, what is with that? Why would I ever go back to that, you know? And going through that experience, you know, it just kind of like, it made me realize that we don't have to go at this thing like ourselves, you know what I mean? We come here and we get the help of other people. And that's like the whole thing is I don't have to tackle that myself. I don't have to tackle life myself. And like when I went through that with my brother, I didn't know the first thing about like what to do, how to grieve and how to go through that, let alone to try to help like my family to do that. And I just had no idea. And it turns out that like, you know, most of it is just showing up for life, right? Like we do here. Half the battle is just showing up and being ready and going through it. And that's what I did. I went through that and I went through the grief and I did that. And, you know, I was there, I was present with my family, and I wouldn't have been present if I was still drinking, right? Because I just would have been drowning myself in my sorrows and I would have just been, you know, doing whatever. But I went through it, you know, and like, I don't know, I still don't know what to make of that. Like, it's above my spiritual pay grade, right, to know like why some people don't make it and why some people don't. My brother, he was like smarter than me. He went to Temple, graduated with an engineering degree, and it just, it never made sense to me, you know. It's just like, why did I make it and he didn't? And I'm still trying to figure that out to this day, I guess, but I feel like one of the purposes, at least that I've drawn from that, is that this whole thing, this whole sobriety thing that I've been doing is part of that, right? Like, what I took away from that whole experience was that, like as an example for AA, right? We come to AA, right, and we have all of these tragedies in our life. We have all these shortcomings, all these character defects, right? And we come to AA, and the whole sentiment of this program, right, is we come to AA and all those character defects, all those flaws, all those terrible experiences, right? Not only do we get like relieved of those by working this spiritual program, not only does God like take those away, but those flaws and those character defects become my greatest asset, right? And that's what happened with that experience, right? Was like that became now an asset that I have. That became something that I can go forth into the world and relate to other people who might be in this program and say that, hey, I've been through that, and this is like, it's going to be okay. This is how you work your way through that, So that was difficult, and shortly after that happened in about 10 months, and, after that I made it to a year sober, and I started to feel pretty good where I was at a year sober, as far as my sobriety. A lot of, like I said, I didn't really have a desire to drink. I was doing a lot of things right, and time just went on, you know what I mean? Life went on. I started to experience a lot of things over the next couple of years, still living up there in Scranton. I did like everything. I had all sorts of like life experiences sober that I'd never done before. I moved into my first apartment, I went to all sorts of concerts, weddings, sporting events. I did all those things sober, all those things that I thought were going to be really difficult. And every time going into like a new experience in life, I didn't know how I was going to come out the other side, but I just, as I said, I was present and I showed up for it and I did it and I worked my way through it, And I stayed up there in Scranton for about 3 years after I got sober, and then back in 2017, my brother had moved back down here. My brother was involved in my sobriety up there. He had actually worked at the halfway house that I ended up going to, and he was involved. Another reason why like my path to sobriety was like very, very, I was very lucky to have it as opposed to most people. Like my brother, my own flesh and blood was, my other brother was not the one that passed away. This one is still sober today, which is awesome, but he was working at the halfway house at the time. He had moved back down here, and he got a job, and he got me a job interview at the place he was working at, and it was a pretty good opportunity to do something different. So I decided that I was going to move back down here from the Scranton area back down here to take this job and do something different, and I decided to do that, and that was significant because I knew at the time that was probably not something that was going to be the best for my sobriety, because I was uprooting from this whole foundation and this network of people that I had made. But the work that I had done in the program up until that time made me confident that I knew that I could do it, you know what I mean? So it was pretty significant because that was like the first time I was able to make really the significant life decision that was, a decision that was going to better my life, not necessarily for my sobriety, but I felt like I was pretty good in a place where I could do it. And I came down here. I moved down here, and I would love to say I hit the ground running and got immediately involved with the home group, but that wasn't the case, right? Immediately when I moved down here at like 3.5 years sober, I thought I was going to do pretty, I was doing okay. Like I could just sort of show up and do the bare minimum, and I was, I felt like drinking was so far removed that I was going to be okay. And I used to come to this group because this was one of the few groups that I knew. I had known Ron prior to moving down here, and I remember for the first 6 to 9 months that I moved down here and took that job, I was just focused on the job, and I was working a ton of overtime and was making money and feeling good about myself. And basically my participation in AA was I would show up to this group on Saturday night, and I would show up 3 minutes before the speaker would start, and I would sit in the back and I wouldn't talk to anybody, and I would soak up my hour of sobriety, and then I would leave as soon as the speaker was done, and that was it. And that was my participation in AA for the first couple, like 9 months that I moved back down here. And I started to get miserable. I really did, because I was just, like I said, I was just doing nothing but focusing on myself for like 6 to 9 months when I moved down here. And eventually I ended up going over to Ron's house, actually, and I was it was kind of like a big book discussion study, and I started talking to a couple other guys that I would see at this meeting regularly, and talking to Ron, I just said, I don't know, I just feel like I need to get more involved, right? Like I need to re-immerse myself with AA. And Ron said, well, why don't you throw on a suit, and why don't you show up at the meeting early and start greeting people and start getting involved. And that's what I did. And following that, I started to show up at this meeting every single week, and I would show up and I would suit up and I would start to get to know everybody, and I would shake hands and talk to people before the meeting, and I started to build relationships with people, right? And I started going to a lot more meetings. I started to meet, go to other meetings and meet other people that were in this AA community around here. And that made all the difference. And really over the course of the next 2 years, like from 2018, 2019, I was just very active with this group. And, life just got better as a result. You know what I mean? Everything. It was great to be a participant in this group. Like I said, I got to come here on a weekly basis and experience some of the best speakers that AA really has to offer. And that was awesome. I did that for a number of years, and it was great. And I also moved back here. I moved back in with my parents, which was really good. The circumstances were perfect because I was working in Warminster and they lived in Doylestown. It was really close, so I moved back here, at least on a temporary basis, I was thinking at the time. And I got to move back in with my parents and really kind of do like these living amends, right? Because like when I made amends to my parents, obviously that was like the people that I felt I owed the greatest amends to. And of course, those were the people that wanted nothing in return other than to see me continue on this path and keep doing what I kept doing. But it was awesome to spend that time with them and to be able to make those living amends and be a part of their life, especially after everything had gone on with my brother, and they had been like alone. At that point, all of their other children had moved out of the house, so it was really nice to just have that time to be able to spend with them. And it was great. The circumstances were great around here, and I did that for a couple of years. And then, over the course of this year, really starting back in 2020, I'd been working this job and I was putting a lot of effort into it. And it was a pretty good job for a while, but I also kind of wanted to move in other directions and I wanted to move up with them and do other things. And when I moved back here, I'd started going back to school and I kind of wanted to pivot what I was doing from just like what I was doing at the time to kind of go back on. And that was something that, I did, and I got myself back in school, and I was hoping that I could kind of do something within the company, and over the course of like a year, those kind of things just didn't materialize. And I decided, earlier this year that I was going to leave that job and that I was going to try to do something else. And I was talking to a friend of mine that lives out there in Colorado now. I knew him from back here, actually. We were like childhood friends, and he's lived out there in Colorado for number of years now, and I would go out there every single year to do like a backpacking camping trip kind of thing. For the past 4 or 5 years I've been going out there, and I was talking to him and I was saying, I don't know, I'm just not feeling it with the job. I kind of want to do this. I'm thinking about just going back and kind of throwing myself in full time with doing the degree, and he told me he was living out there, and his wife that he had been married to for 9 years, they were getting separated, and he was saying, if you wanted a roommate, if you want to come out here and do something different, and I did a lot of praying on it and kind of praying and meditation. I did a lot of it on it, and I decided that I was going to do that I was going to leave the job and I was going to try to do something different, and I was going to try to have a new experience. And it's been cool, it really has. I kind of did that earlier this year. At the end of the summer, I moved out there, and it's been something different, I have found in AA that really just in life as a result of going to AA that I need to keep things moving, right? I need to be moving forward, because if I'm not moving forward, I'm moving backwards. That's really kind of like what it boils down to. And I took that on as, again, similar to like last time. It was just kind of like something where it was, I knew I was kind of leaving where I was at in my comfort zone and what I was doing, but I was going to take on some new challenges, and I was comfortable with that, and that's what I did. And it's been a cool experience out there. It really has. I've been out there, like I said, since the summer. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Hopefully I am going full-time doing this school thing. I'm hoping that's going to pay off for me in the long run. And that remains to be seen, It's been crazy. It's been cool to be back here and see my family. Unfortunately, my dad passed away like 2 weeks ago, and I had to deal with that. It was like a week before I was coming back here for Christmas. And, that was difficult. And I've just had to go through that the past week or so, and been dealing with that, dealing with it with my family, and I don't really have a ton to say about that. It's still really fresh, but it's been something that I've had to deal with, and as a result of what happened prior with my brother, this has been, obviously it's still been very tragic, but I have learn to start to accept that this is life, right? You know what I mean? I have to show up for life, and I have to participate, and I have to move forward with it, you know? And I knew right from the get-go that God doesn't put anything on my plate that I can't handle, you know? So I accepted it, and, you know, I've been dealing with that. But I guess just talk a little bit to wrap things up, you know, I just got a couple more minutes here, but I guess to just talk about like where I'm at as far as like what AA looks like in my life today and where I'm at. I try to continue to be like a student of AA, and I try to continue to be a student of life and to learn and to grow and continue to move forward, because one thing I found is that spiritual growth, like the way I experience spiritual growth, it never comes from myself, right? I have to go outside myself, and I have to seek that out, and I have to seek the knowledge from other people and from life circumstances, and I have to continue moving forward with that. I maintain like a healthy fear of relapse today, right? You know what I mean? That's a big thing that I thought about, that I wanted to talk about. And, you know, when I wake up today, it's not like at 7 some years sober today, I don't have to swear off alcohol, right? It's just like this comes naturally to me today by living a spiritual program and practicing the spiritual principles of the AA in my life. I don't have to wake up and I don't think about drinking. I don't think about not drinking, right? It just comes, you know what I mean? And I just live my life. And I know that if I was to go back to drinking today, right? You know what I mean? Like if I was to pick up today, you know, I think I used to hear that there used to be this guy that I knew from back in Scranton, and he would talk about a relapse that he had after 9 some years, and he would say that, you know, I relapsed and the worst thing that could have happened, and that was nothing, right? Like nothing happened. I didn't end up in jail. I didn't get into a fight. I didn't crash my car. And like, that's me, right? Because that's just like the cunning and baffling part of alcohol, right? It's like I put a drink in my body and I probably think I'm okay. And maybe nothing happens that first time. And, you know, some indeterminate amount of period of time goes by. And the thing that happens, though, is when I put like a drug or a drink in my system, it might not be right away, but sooner or later that my experience has been that becomes the most important thing to me, you know, is really what it boils down to. And I just choose not to let that happen today. There's so many things like my family and my spirituality and my health, things that that are so much more important to me than a drink, you know what I mean? And it comes through practicing like I said, practicing the spiritual program in my life has just made all of the difference. It really has. I just try to stay close to God. I try to pray and I try to meditate on a daily basis and just kind of, you know, live life, try to put one foot in front of the other to the best of my ability and try to just keep going forward. I think I'll close. I usually like to close just by saying that my experience with like Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole, when I look at it, like when I was at my absolute lowest, when I was at my darkest hour, I feel like the program of AA, a higher power, came into my life and it presented itself to me in this form of hope. And that goes back to, like I said, just kind of meeting people early on, starting to have these feelings that maybe there was a little bit of hope that I could kind of turn things around and that I could kind of live this life that I never thought that I would be able to live, which is really what it is. And all I've done really for the past 7 years is just try to the best of my ability, to just kind of feed that and just kind of let that hope grow in my life, you know? And just by practicing the program of AA and trying to stay close to God and live by spiritual principles, that is just, it's made all the difference, you know, and I owe everything to AA. You know, I've gotten to watch my brother, like I said, I have a brother who's been sober longer than me. I have one of my best friends who still lives up there in the Scranton area. The guy that I lived with, right, when things were at their absolute lowest, he's turned his life around. He's now 6 years sober. And I've just gotten to see so much. It's worked wonders in my life, and that's about all I got. So I appreciate everybody in this group, and thanks for letting me speak tonight. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm an alcoholic. Let's give Brian another round of applause. Welcome home, Brian. It was lovely to have you tonight. So thank you to everyone who helped us set up tonight. A reminder that every single week we have a business meeting here at 7 o'clock. You are welcome to join us. We are always looking for more home group members. If you'd like to be of service, we're happy to have you. We also have greeters that we need every single week. We start greeting at 7:50 each week, so if you want to be an official greeter, we'll see you right here next week. Don't forget the meeting after the meeting. We're happy to chat with everybody and get to know all of you. And our speakers, they come here of their own time and of their own expense, so it's customary that we form a line after the meeting to thank our speakers. With that, we have a nice way of closing, and Happy New Year. We will have a moment of silence tonight for the still sick and suffering. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever.
already shut these off?